There is a king standing in a theater by the sea. He is wearing robes made of silver, not silver-colored, actual woven silver, and when the morning sun catches the fabric, the light scatters across the crowd like something divine. The crowd has noticed. The crowd has decided to say so. The voice of a god, they shout. Not of a man. The king does not correct them. He is mid-sentence. The applause has not yet stopped. And then something happens at Josephus, a Jewish historian who was not a Christian, who had every reason to write favorably of this king, records in careful, clinical detail. Something begins inside the king's body. Something that will not stop for 5 days. We will come back to this moment. But not yet. Because this king is not the first. He is not even the second or the third. He is part of a line, a sequence of rulers stretching across centuries, from the banks of the Nile to the imperial courts of Rome, every one of whom made the same decision. Every one of whom reached out their hand toward the same target. And every one of whom met an end that history recorded with uncomfortable specificity. This is not a story about religion. This is not a story about politics. This is not a story about ancient history. This is a story about a pattern, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. We begin in Egypt. The exact name of the pharaoh is still debated by historians, Ramesses II, Thutmose III, Amenhotep II, but the action is not debated. A decree goes out from the most powerful throne on earth. Every Hebrew boy born must be thrown into the Nile. Think about what that takes. Think about what you would feel, waking up in that village, every morning, not knowing if today is the day they come. Think about the infrastructure of cruelty that requires soldiers at every birth, informants in every neighborhood, a state so committed to destroying one people that it weaponizes the river itself. The Nile was Egypt's god. Life came from the Nile. And Pharaoh turns it into a tool of murder. The target, though the king does not know this, is a bloodline. A specific bloodline. One that will eventually produce a child in Bethlehem, in a cattle stall, 1,000 years later. Here is what most people miss. Pharaoh was not simply afraid of a slave revolt. The text of Exodus tells you something stranger. He was afraid of something he could not name. The people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us, he says. Too mighty. These are slaves. They build cities with their hands and sleep in the dirt. What does Pharaoh see in them that frightens a god king? He sees something he cannot control. You know this feeling, the panic of encountering a force that does not answer to you. So he sends the army. You know what happens next. The sea opens. The army goes in. The sea closes. Josephus, writing in the 1st century, records the Egyptian account of this event, an account that does not credit any Hebrew god, but still admits the army was lost. The most powerful military force on earth, in pursuit of unarmed slaves, and the Nile, Pharaoh's own god, swallows them. The king who turned the water into a weapon dies by water. You cannot miss the symmetry. The pattern has begun. Move forward 1,000 years. The Roman Empire has installed a client king over Judea, a man named Herod. History calls him the Great, which tells you something about how history is written, because Josephus spends considerable time describing what greatness actually looked like on Herod's body at the end of his life. But first, the decree. Magi arrive from the east, asking about a child. A king of the Jews, they say. Born recently. They have followed a star. Herod calls in his advisors, gets the location, Bethlehem, and sends the Magi to find the child. He tells them he wants to worship this new king too. He is lying. When the Magi do not return, Herod issues an order that has echoed through 2,000 years of Christian memory. Kill every boy in Bethlehem under the age of 2. Everyone. The family has already fled to Egypt, the child survives, but the boys of Bethlehem do not. Matthew records the grief of that village with a quote from Jeremiah. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted, because they are no more. Stay with me. Because here is what happens to Herod the Great. Josephus, again, not a Christian, a man who received Roman patronage and had political reasons to speak well of Rome's allies, describes Herod's final illness across 3 paragraphs of his Antiquities of the Jews. The details are specific enough that modern physicians have attempted a retrospective diagnosis. His body itches uncontrollably, the itch reaching somewhere under the skin that no scratching can reach. His genitals are putrefied, producing worms. He has convulsions. He cannot breathe. He tries to kill himself with a fruit knife and is restrained by his own cousin. He orders the arrest of the most distinguished men in Judea so that when he dies, there will be mourning, because he knows no one will weep for him otherwise. He dies 5 days after ordering the execution of his own son. The king who ordered the death of every boy under 2 in Bethlehem spent his final days consumed from within. Josephus did not find this ironic. He simply recorded it. Every king. So far, same result. If you are watching this and you have not yet subscribed, this is the moment to do it, because we are not even halfway through the list, and the deaths get stranger from here. Herod the Great leaves behind a dynasty. 3 sons divide his kingdom, and 2 of them step into the same story their father began. The first is Herod Antipas, the one you may know best, because he is the one who kills John the Baptist. John is in prison because he told Antipas publicly that it was not lawful for him to have his brother's wife. Herodias, the wife in question, wants John dead. Antipas is afraid of the crowd, who believe John is a prophet. So he does nothing. Until a birthday dinner. Until a dance. Until a promise made in front of witnesses that he cannot take back. John's head arrives on a plate. And then, months later, Herod Antipas receives a prisoner at his trial. A man from Galilee, which falls under Antipas's jurisdiction. Pilate sends Jesus to him hoping for a verdict. Antipas has wanted to see this man for a long time. He hopes to see a miracle, some kind of performance. Jesus says nothing to him. Not one word. Antipas mocks him. Dresses him in elegant robes as a joke. Sends him back to Pilate. Now watch what happens next. Herodias, the woman who wanted John dead, whose daughter danced for John's head, she is also the cause of Antipas's ruin. Her brother, Agrippa, goes to Rome and whispers in the emperor's ear. Antipas is dangerous, Agrippa says. Antipas is stockpiling weapons. Antipas has ambitions. The emperor calls Antipas to Rome. Antipas cannot defend himself. His wife goes into exile with him, the same wife whose ambition destroyed him. He loses his title. He loses his wealth. He loses his territory. He is sent to Gaul, modern France, and he dies there, in a foreign land, stripped of everything, his name slowly erased from the record. The man who had John the Baptist beheaded to satisfy a dancing girl died unknown, in exile, with nothing. The second son of Herod's line who enters this story is Herod Agrippa I, grandson of Herod the Great, Rome's appointed king over all Judea. He is the king in the silver robes. Agrippa decides early that the new Christian movement is a problem. He has James, the brother of John, one of the 12, arrested and executed with a sword. It pleases the crowd, so he arrests Peter next. Peter escapes miraculously the night before his execution. This does not please Agrippa. He has the prison guards executed instead. Then Agrippa travels to Caesarea Maritima, the great Roman city on the coast, to give a speech. He is in a dispute with the cities of Tyre and Sidon. They need his grain, they need his goodwill, and they have sent diplomats to secure it. Agrippa enters the theater wearing robes woven from silver thread. Josephus records this. The morning light hits the silver and the crowd. They decide that a man who looks like this cannot simply be a man. The voice of a god, they shout. Not of a man. And Agrippa accepts it. Luke, writing in Acts, uses a single Greek word for what happens next, skolakabotos. It appears nowhere else in the entire New Testament. It means, eaten by worms. Agrippa is struck immediately, seized by something, and he dies 5 days later in agony. Josephus confirms the 5 days. Josephus confirms the pain. Josephus, who was not there to write a Christian sermon, records the same event with the same timeline. The crowd was still cheering. He was mid-sentence. The applause had not yet stopped. And this is where it gets remarkable. Because the story does not end with Herod. The pattern does not end with one dynasty. It scales. The Roman Empire itself steps into the role. Nero is the 5th emperor of Rome. History remembers him as a man of extraordinary vanity. He fancied himself a poet, a musician, an artist of the first rank. In the summer of 64 AD, Rome burns. 14 districts. 3 days and 7 nights. When it is finally over, Nero builds a palace on the ruins. The rumor starts immediately. Nero started the fire himself, to clear space for his building project. Nero needs someone to blame. He chooses the Christians. What happens next, Tacitus records, and Tacitus despised Christians. He called their faith a destructive superstition. He had no sympathy for them. And yet even Tacitus, writing 50 years later, calls what Nero did to them excessive. Christians are arrested. Some are covered in animal skins and torn apart by dogs in Nero's gardens while he watches. Others are dipped in tar, fixed to poles, and set on fire. Human torches to light Nero's evening parties. The Apostle Paul is executed in Rome during this period. Peter is crucified, upside down, according to tradition, because he said he was not worthy to die the same way as his Lord. Nero watches his garden parties from the stands and considers himself an artist. Here is how Nero dies. The empire turns against him. His generals revolt. The Senate declares him a public enemy. He flees Rome with 4 servants, from the court of an emperor, and hides in a villa outside the city. When he hears the soldiers coming, he cannot make himself do what needs to be done. He holds a blade to his own throat and cannot press it home. He asks a freed slave to help him. Suetonius records his last words. "What an artist dies with me!" He dies in a ditch outside the city he tried to light with human beings. Abandoned. Unhelpful even to himself at the end. If you had told him, at the height of his reign, that this is where the story ends, he would have laughed at you. One emperor follows another. Domitian takes the throne in 81 AD and decides, systematically, to remove the problem the Christians represent. He does not burn them this time. He exiles the leaders. He executes the ones with influence. He confiscates property. He demands worship as a god. Dominus et Deus, Lord and God, and those who refuse to say it face the consequences. An old man named John is arrested and sent to an island called Patmos. It is a volcanic island in the Aegean Sea, black rock, harsh sun, minimal fresh water. You sent people there to disappear them, to make them irrelevant, to let time and isolation finish what execution would make into martyrdom. John does not disappear. On that black volcanic island, on a Sunday, the old man has a vision so violent he falls on his face. And a voice speaks, and what that voice says becomes the final book of the Bible. Domitian dies in 96 AD. His wife Domitia is among the conspirators. His own household staff stabs him 7 times. The Senate, the day after his death, votes to erase his name from every public monument in Rome, what they called damnatio memoriae, the damnation of memory. Stone carvers go to work across the empire, chiseling Domitian out of history. The Senate could not erase John. John outlives Domitian. John outlives the persecution. John returns from Patmos to Ephesus and dies there, in bed, as an old man, at peace, the only one of the 12 apostles not to die violently. The island they sent him to die on became the place where he wrote the words that 2 billion people still read. This is not luck. This is not coincidence. This is not the random cruelty of history turning against the powerful. This is the same hand, the Hebrew Yad, that covered the bloodline from Egypt to Bethlehem to Rome. Augustine of Hippo sat down to write in 410 AD. He was watching the news from Rome. The city had fallen to the Visigoths. The eternal city. The city that had burned Christians as torches. The city that had exiled John to Patmos. The city that had beheaded Paul. Burning. Augustine picked up his pen and began what would become one of the longest books in Christian history. He called it the City of God. His argument was simple: the empires of men are not eternal. Only one kingdom has no end. The Hebrew word for what those kings were reaching for is Mashiach, the Anointed One. Not a title of power but of consecration. Marked. Set apart. Hidden in the shadow of the divine hand, the Hebrew Yad, the power and covering of God. Every king who reached for the Mashiach reached into that shadow. And the shadow held. 3 things to take away from what you have just heard. First, the documentation is not Christian. Josephus was Jewish and Roman aligned. Tacitus was a pagan who despised the faith. Suetonius wrote imperial biography. These are hostile witnesses. And they recorded, without intending to, a pattern that believers have been pointing to for 2,000 years. Second, you are living inside the same story. The same author who hid a baby in Egypt while a king raged is the same author writing now. Whatever you are facing right now, whatever weight is on you today, whatever power has turned its attention toward you, it is not the first time something like you has been targeted. And it is not the first time the target survived. Third, and this is the one I want you to carry, John was sent to Patmos to be forgotten. They sent him to a rock in the ocean to disappear. And on that rock, you can picture it, can you not? The wind off the Aegean, the black stone warm under his hands, the sound of water on every side. On a Sunday morning, he heard a voice. And he wrote it down. And 2,000 years later, you are sitting exactly where you are sitting right now, watching a video on a device that would have looked like sorcery to every king on this list, and those words are still being read. Nero is a ditch outside Rome. Domitian is a chisel mark on empty stone. John is still speaking. Which king's death on this list shocked you the most? Was it the one who died mid-sentence while the crowd still cheered? Was it the one who tried to kill himself and could not? Tell me in the comments below. I read every one. The last empire standing is not Rome. It never was.